was 1925. Mount Rushmore National Monument site was dedicated. The Chrysler Corporation is founded. Sears Robuck opens first store in Chicago. Nellie Tayloe Ross takes office in Wyoming as the first female governor elected in the United States. The Grand Ole Opry begins broadcasting, and Marjorie Radford was born. And today, Marjorie is 95 years old. Happy birthday, Marjorie.
Thank you very much.
I am looking forward to this time together so much. We have a mutual friend, David Sitton, and he arranged our time together. And today, of course, is October the 7th as we record our program. And it's going to broadcast on this afternoon as we record. But you're 95 years old today.
It's a wonderful time to be alive.
You were born in 1925, the same year that Dick Van Dyke, Malcolm X, Barbara Bush, Margaret Thatcher, and B.B. King were born. Where did life begin for you? Tell us about the beginning, early days, Miss Margie.
My father was a pilot in World War I, and when he got out, he still was in the reserve and loved it very much. And when I was almost 4, like a week, he was killed training another older man to fly for the man at the who head of the airport was on vacation and had asked my father. They called Chuck, and I never knew him as father, so Mother called him Chuck, so I called him Chuck. And Mother was 30 years old. He was 31. And so Mother had to go to work, and we were in California with our other grandparents. And my grandparents were in Memphis, and Mother had to go to work. So she had to come back to Memphis, and we lived with my grandparents until I married.
Okay.
And so I grew up in a very happy home.
Wow, that's wonderful.
With a lot of people coming and going.
A lot of things happened since 1925. The Scopes trials in Dayton, Tennessee, the so-called monkey trial took place in 25 with John T. Scopes. That was the young high school science teacher accused of teaching evolution, which was in violation of Tennessee state law. And a lot has changed.
Big famous debate.
Yeah, a lot has changed in America since that time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And now evolution is kind of a norm for our public school teaching. So much has changed. Well, you were 14 years of age when the Second World War began in 1939. Do you have any remembrances about those times?
I was at Central High School.
Okay.
And I remember we had I remember the day that we walked down on Monday morning after Pearl Harbor and listened to Roosevelt declare war. And I remember how sad the teachers were, but not knowing what war was and being a girl, I didn't get into it except that I was in student council, and we had a holiday when rationing came out, and we had to help. People had to come sign up for rationing, food rationing and clothes and all that. That was a big deal.
Did you get involved with that? Did you
yes,
help do that?
we were involved with that as members of the student council.
Right. Do you recall like older maybe guy friends possibly being called off to war at that time?
Boys in my that graduated in my high school joined and before they finished.
Right.
A lot of them did.
Where and how did you meet William Chubby Andrews?
Well, let me see. I went to a dance at Christmas, and he was a friend to a high school. He was in a fraternity that my Chubb had been in, but the college boys used to come back and to meet the girls in high school at the parties. And so he saw me, and he asked this friend, he said, "Who is that girl over there?" And he said, "Well, that's my date." He said, "Do you want to meet her?" He said, "Yes, I do." So he introduced me, but we didn't dance too long with one. It was kind of a quick exchange dancing, and I just said a few things to him, and I knew his name was kind of funny. It was a nickname, Chubby, and so when I met him, I said, "I think I've heard my sister speak of you." Patty was a little bit older and had known Chubby, but I don't, other than just saying hello. And so when I got home and told Patty I had met him, and she said, you blabbermouth, you just talk too much. He's going to think I've been talking about him.
Do you remember the type of dance you did? Slow dance?
We were jitterbugging.
You were doing a jitterbug?
Yeah, oh, yeah. He never did learn how to do that. He had a little fast step he did, but he never did learn to jitterbug.
Was it a magical romance? I mean, when was it that you realized there was a connection?
My sister was in college and bumped into him in it was around the end of January, and he saw Patty, and he said, "Oh, I met your sister." Said, "I've been planning on asking her out." And Patty said, "Well, why don't you?" And he called, and our first date was going to church, because you couldn't date during the week, and you couldn't date, and we pretty much had parties every Friday and Saturday night, so that was the first night we could go out.
Wow.
And then I got nervous because I didn't know him, and really never, other than that meeting. So I thought, well, I'll just break this date. And so when I tried to break it, I kept saying, well, I have to go to church. And he said, "I like to go to church. I'll pick you up." So he never would let me off the hook. So our first date was going to church.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And we had to be home at 9:30, so it wasn't much of a date.
What was it that attracted you? Was it his wit? Was it his charm, his
Well,
looks?
he was older, and my granny said if you date older boys, then the boys your own age won't ask you out. So I wasn't too happy about letting them know I was dating somebody older. He was 4.5 years older than I was.
How did he propose to you?
Oh, well, we planned it after 2 years. But my granny didn't ever let us go steady with anybody, so I had other boyfriends. He wasn't the only one.
He wasn't the only one.
No, but he found out that he could come over, and we didn't have a car, and he found out that he could take me to Young Life during the week, and he'd pick up my friends. So he started coming to Young Life. And we had just started Young Life in the homes. It was very new.
Yeah.
And he was older, but he always loved people and got along with everybody, so it was fun.
So he had a taxi service then to Young Life.
Yes. And so he figured that out.
Your husband served as captain of the United States Army Medical Corps during World War II with the occupational forces in Japan. Did he ever share any of those experiences with you when he was in the war?
The war was ended before he went over, and he was in the occupation and had the Sagamo prisoners as part of his patients and operated on some of them. And but it really ended up being a fun thing. He started baseball and all kinds of sports for their activities. He was a golfer. He was a captain of the golf team at UT when he was there in pre-med. So he got on the Inter-Pacific Golf Tournament, and they won and went to Hawaii while I was at home.
So he's out having fun in Hawaii while you're back home.
And Japan, too.
Yeah.
But he got interested in a ministry called the Far Eastern Gospel Crusade.
Yes.
And they had a wonderful ministry with a sensei, a missionary, that built a beautiful building there after the war, and for the servicemen. And he would load up a car and well, I don't mean a car, but truck or what,
right,
from the hospital, and take the nurses a lot of times into the meetings. And they had that organization up until about 2 years ago, where the children of the ones that had been there, and they ended up being, many of them, missionaries going back.
Wow.
And when he came back, he said, "Do you think?" And he met some Japanese believers and wrote them for a while. And he would say, "Do you think we need to go to Japan as a missionary?" And I said, no.
A little too far from home.
So he returned, and we had two little children by that time. And he went back into the Baptist hospital and for the rest of his training.
Margie, when did you first hear the gospel of Jesus Christ?
In my home. I had a wonderful, godly parents, generational. I mean, we had some pretty outstanding ministers in our background, and Granny just loved the Lord, and my mother, who was widowed at 30, loved the Lord, and she lived to be almost 100.
Did she?
And she was sharp as a tack, and she lived with me for 10 years at the end, and she would say, hurry up and finish that book so I can get on it. She wanted to read everything I read, and she went to Bible study with me.
Did she?
Till the very last.
I think that's taken up some interest in you because you read a book each week, too, I understand.
I do. And now that Chubby died in 2005, and so I'm living with my granddaughter, and her husband bought my house, but letting me live there.
That's
so
nice
I have
of
a
him.
lot of free time.
What are some of your earliest memories of going to church? What hymns did you like to sing, and what were some of the preachers that you got to hear?
Oh, well, when I look back on it, I think about it a lot in the night when I wake up, of how God placed us in places where we heard the truth just constantly. Mother didn't have a car, but when Mid-South Bible College and would have all these wonderful, and our church would have speakers, my mother would find out about it and get a ride, and we'd go. And when I remember hearing Major Ian Thomas when he first came, and my mother was so thrilled, but he talked so fast, and I was a young Christian, and I didn't really catch on to what he was saying. But it grew into a relationship with him. He stayed at my home some, and reading his books. I think he had a really a big impact on my the truth and wanting to know more. What the Lord has for.
And what about favorite hymns during those days? And maybe
I
something you carried
remember
through.
going to church camp. We were members of Idle Isle Presbyterian. My grandfather was an elder there. And they went to camp, and I just remember loving the songs, the hymns. And, of course, I'm a hymn lover.
There's some wonderful hymns, aren't they?
Oh, they are.
God gave you and Chubby 5 children. What was life like growing up around the Andrews home during those early days with the kids?
Oh, we had a happy time. Chub was a man that had many interests himself, so it kept things going. Although he was busy, he left the house at 7:00 or earlier, but he really made it a point to get home for dinner at night, and that was the one thing that I feel like is so important. For the kids today are not having dinner with their families because they're going to soccer and don't get home till 9:00, and I think they're missing a lot, and they need to really be working on that a little bit more.
I think you're so right, Miss Margie. Your husband, as you mentioned, Chubby, was an active sportsman, an envied winged shooter, and an enthusiastic angler. Did you ever go hunting and fishing with him?
Yes, he was very disappointed when I went after. They didn't hunt during the war, and then Chubby started doing taxidermy with one of the men that worked for his mother. Taught him to do taxidermy when he was young, and he couldn't go hunting with his daddy till he was 12. So his dad would bring home birds and ducks, and that's what he worked on. And so after the war, they could hunt. He came home with his first duck, was so excited about it, and he said, well, I've just got to mount this bird. So he started mounting again, and when he died, he had over 1,000 game birds in our house.
Oh, my. Now, did you ever help him with the taxidermy?
No, I didn't. I didn't do anything. And my granny told me that I should never learn to clean game or my marriage couldn't survive. So I didn't ever do that. The only thing I did do is that when he would fish, he would get brim, and he loved to fix them up real small, skin them out, and I maybe helped a little with that, and because that was easy.
Yeah.
But I never did clean game.
Did you ever play golf with him?
I had to eat it.
You had to eat it.
Yes, but I didn't really like it. And he would say, isn't this delicious? And I said, no, you're making a liar out of me.
Did you ever golf with him?
Yes, I did. In the afternoon, he would call at work a lot of times at 4 and say, let's go play golf. And I was really pitiful. And I would get to the second hole, and I'd think, oh, I have 8 to go and 7 to go. And I'd be so tired. And then about the 6th hole, I'd start hitting it, And one time I did a perfect drive and hit a little bird on the fairway.
Oh, my goodness.
And Chubby's comment was, well, now you can always say you made a birdie.
You made a birdie. I love it. What have been some of the ways, Margie, that God has allowed you to serve through the church or maybe other ministries?
Well, I was not creative at all, but I wanted to be available, and I knew that the Lord at an early age, and the Lord used Young Life. My Sunday school teacher had a friend from Dallas come in to start Young Life when I was in the 11th grade, and that had a real impact on it. And the camp that Chubby went to my senior year was a story which I won't go into. He was to take us out there, and he had promised to take my friends for the weekend because I worked, and I couldn't go for the week, but they said I could come on the weekend. So that Friday night, he hemmed and hawed at the door, and he said, I have something to tell you. I won't be able to take you tomorrow because my friend, who he calls Fats, and they called each other Fat, and he was another medical student. And he said his uncle wants us to come to Clarksdale and play golf. And he said, if he calls, we've got to go. And I said, but you promised to take me to do this 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he said, well, you'll just have to understand when we get invited by Uncle Skinny, we've got to go. And so all of a sudden I said, well, if you don't take me, don't ever call me again.
Whoa.
So he hemmed and hawed and said, well, you know what he said? I'll let you know tomorrow. So you saw what he was going through with.
So what was
and after being married to him all those years, I realized what a sacrifice it was for him. But anyway, the next day at the bank, he came to get me, and he looked very sheepishly, and I thought, what is he going to say? And he came up and he said, I've decided to take you.
He said the right thing.
It was that night at the camp that he trusted the Lord.
Was it really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is beautiful.
Jim
Margie.
Rayburn was, and the thing that was the beginning, and he really said, if you get the boys to come, the girls will follow.
Oh.
And the kids had been there all week long learning scripture and memorizing and singing real loud, and it was very touching. And that was that night at the campfire. He said the next night he told me he trusted the Lord. And the amazing thing was that he immediately started telling people. So often when they do it, they wait a while till they get their courage up. But he didn't. He just started telling everybody that, right from the very beginning.
That is beautiful, Miss Margie. I love that story. Now, there's a floating story going around that you and Chubby went to London, and he winds up riding away with the Queen.
Yes, he did. We were at a membership golf tournament with the pro, and no, that was another time. This was Eddie Apple had dogs, and he had gone over and had a connection with the Queen's gamekeeper, and invited him to come to the game thing that they have every year at Sandringham. So Chubby went, and the night before they invited us to go to the gamekeeper's dinner. It was a Thanksgiving night dinner. And Eddie said to the man, now Dr. Andrews has a little trouble walking. If he needs help, can you help him if we come tomorrow? And he said, oh, yes, we will. So he did. He found and I was walking in the back, so I wasn't right there with him. I was somebody talking to somebody else. And he called and said, Dr. Andrews needs help. So he came and he climbed over the fence and he fell. But it didn't hurt him. And he got up and walked up, and he got right to the top. And there was the Queen in her Land Rover and said, is this the gentleman that needs a lift? And Eddie said, and his friend, who was British, said yes. And so she told one of her guards, she had 2 guards in there. She was driving, but she had 2 guards, and then she told one of them to get out to let Eddie and Chubby get in. And so that's when they drove and stayed with her until the end of it, up on a hill
And left you behind.
Yeah, it left me behind.
How did you feel about that?
Well, I just really didn't know what was going on. Ended up talking to this British guy, was telling me his life story, and so anyway. But nobody would have believed it if it hadn't been that, because Eddie was one that teased and really didn't always tell the truth, and so. But it's been a fun story.
Oh, that's a wonderful story. You have a relationship, I understand, and you can help me correct if I'm wrong, with an inmate that you correspond with or have corresponded with?
Who?
An inmate, somebody who's incarcerated?
Oh, yes, right now. Mitch Rutledge is in the Birmingham Correction Institute. It's south of Birmingham, but even before the countdown, they won't let him have company with just two people that sign up, and so we can't go down and see him.
Is this through an organization?
I have a book club, and I just saw it advertised, and I thought, well, we ought to know about prisoners, and so it was Death on Hold by Bert Folsom, who is a retired Hillsdale professor, and they had early, when he was at 21, had been in a gang and a very sad life, and he killed this man, not intentionally, but with a group, and they gave him the electric chair, and so they were interviewed, and they said that the interviewer said he was dumb, and so just let him go to the thing, and the Time magazine printed that out in the paper. A Catholic nun saw it in the paper, and she, in California, she said, "This is ridiculous, I'm going to start writing him." She became a friend for life. She died several years ago, but she was the first one that he said when he got there, he realized he needed a friend. He was actually in lockdown in a one cell for 8 years as a teenager. And anyway, then Bert saw the same article, and he started going with his wife. He said, this poor fella's going to hell if he doesn't know the Lord, and we need to go talk to him. Yeah. And then you could do that. You could go to him and have friends.
Right.
But they have so many now, they don't do it. In lockdown, they haven't been able to have anybody either. But Bert Folsom and his wife have been precious friends and still are, and see him every month until this lockdown. They haven't been. But he talks on the phone, and he calls me twice a week, and I'm his friend, and several more. My nephew, and we've gotten he hadn't had a lawyer for years, and so we've got a lawyer, and we're praying that he'll have a pardon. He's growing in the Lord. He taught himself to read.
Did he?
Isn't that amazing?
That is wonderful.
And they think that he couldn't read, and so he couldn't get a job because he couldn't fill out an application, and he was he's 6'3", and so he was embarrassed to let anybody know he couldn't read. That's how you got in with the gangs.
Wow.
But he loves the Lord, and he's witnessing, and I'm just praying. And if you hear my voice, pray for Mitch, that the Lord will give the lawyers wisdom.
Pray for Mitch. Miss Margie, you have 28 grandchildren and their spouses, 81 great-grandchildren, and 1 great-great-grandchild. What do you enjoy most about this crew?
Well, I just love seeing them. And my children make it possible. I spend a lot of Christmas in Michigan, and my youngest son is a pastor, a church planter, and I've spent a lot of Christmases up there with them because I have some that around here I get to see more. And my children are good about having their families together and getting us together. So I know them all by name.
Yes.
And
you pray for them by name, don't you?
Yeah, I don't. I have 2 that I haven't seen. One's in Louisville, and my great, and I'm hoping to see him this month.
Wow.
And another one that was early and in Nashville, I haven't seen him.
What are some of your hopes and concerns for your children and grandchildren?
I want them to know the Lord. I remember when my oldest daughter got married, I came across 3 John 4. John, as an old man, said, "I have no greater joy than to hear my children are walking in the truth." And when they were young, you wanted them to be popular, and you wanted to be successful in sports and be a friend and have friends and friendly. I had that in my mind a lot. But as I grew in the Lord, I realized the most important thing is for them to know the Lord and walk according to His plan for their life and not mine.
Yes. Wow.
And I had the joy of seeing that being accomplished. But this is a hard time for some of the younger ones now, this culture generation. And I just know that the only thing I can do right now is to pray for them.
Yes.
And to be ready to give an answer if they ask me. But they don't ask you too much.
But you're
they
ready.
They might get an answer.
Yeah, but you're ready, right? Now, Miss Margie, what are some of the daily practices that you're committed to each day?
Well, I read when I wake up early. I read about 4 when this is my routine. If something happens in the the family, or if it gets off, that's the Lord's business too. But most mornings I read 4 chapters. Right now I can do this because I don't have a husband, and I don't have responsibilities of a house, keeping a house, so I kind of have free time to do that. So I read 4 chapters. I'm in 2 Kings this morning, read 4 chapters, and then when the next thing I read is a Spurgeon PM. I have 1 year I do the AM, and I can't take but one a day with him. He's really so good. But this year I'm doing PM, and I read his for the day. It was so good about trusting the Lord for what I'm doing this day. And it is every day. The Lord just seems to be giving me the scripture He wants us and the truths He wants us to hone in on every day. And then the next thing I read is Ronnie Stevens' devotional book on John. One day for that. And then I'm reading New Mercies by David Tripp, which is so right now. I've had a lot of devotional books, but this is one of my favorites, and I love to recommend it. I like to call that my men book, because men don't like to read as a rule as much as women, and I think they really would love that, and us couples. And so then I have a new one that is given to me, another one, so a woman's devotional book. And I found was in Michigan at a library when they get rid of their books, and my son loved a book lover, so we all went down as a family, and I found this little book which they discovered they think is Abraham Lincoln's devotional book, a very small book. I'm trying to think of the author. Put it together. It's one little part of a verse and a little poem that goes with it. It's very small, so I finish up on that. So, and then by that time, it's usually time to get breakfast. So
that's all before breakfast.
This is all before breakfast. So I really shouldn't complain about being, but having this, because I have things that I'm able to do that I would never be able to do if I hadn't been free.
Yes. Wow, that is wonderful.
And I'm not putting that as a burden on anybody.
No. Everybody's time, there's periods, there's seasons of your life, and they change and they become sometimes more flexible. I really didn't start
till I was 30 when the Lord told me, He said, you get busy and you get up in the morning and you start. And I'm so thankful that I did that through the years,
Do you have any advice for those hoping to reach 95 years of age?
I think to walk daily with the Lord. It's like it's the Word of God is like food. One of my verses I loved where he said, but Moses said, "Man does not live by bread alone, by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God." And if we don't have food, we're not going to grow physically, and we're not going to grow spiritually, unless we partake of His Word. And He makes it alive to you, and the Bible says it is alive.
Yes.
And when it speaks to your heart every day, you know it is.
Margie, you've lived through some difficult days in American history and around the world. What concerns do you have about this present generation as they engage these challenging and evil times that we live? I
think the problem is busyness, and people are putting a lot of stress on what you're producing, and like athletics gets to be too important, and it is important at that stage in your life to teach you discipline and the things, but we have to just know that God's agenda for you is His best. And it is going to be suffering. There will be trials. There'll be disappointments. But even God uses the disappointments in your life to teach you what it is to trust Him.
What are the plans for the rest of your day? This is your 95th birthday. What plans?
I'm having a luncheon with my daughters-in-law and daughters. And then this afternoon, the granddaughter that I live with is planned a drive-through for neighbors, and she's got balloons all over the front of the house and a sign, and so I'm to sit in the yard and greet my friends that are coming by. So that's my day.
That is wonderful.
I thank you so much.
Margie, God bless you. This has been a joy. As I mentioned to you, I've never personally met you until today. But years ago, when I was a student at Mid-South Bible College, I did meet your husband Chubby and Rad. And I know Maureen, Rad's wife. I know the influence that the Andrews family has had in our community for so many people. And God bless you. Thank you so very much for being on.
Well, I just thank the Lord for the people. I think right now the things I'm appreciating so much about how the Lord brings the people into your life that He wants to be there. And that makes every person that you meet, regardless of where you are or what you're doing, they're significant and they're sent to you by the Lord.
Well, thanks again for being our guest today.
Thank you.
Happy 95th birthday.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Well, friends, that's all the time we have on this edition of Mid-South Viewpoint. Our pleasure to visit with Marjorie Andrews and the wonderful legacy, the stories, really about Jesus, about God being faithful to her through her life as she's trusted Him and her family. Thank you for joining us. Hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.